was one printed in a Nintendo magazine that said you could become the snake from the background of Blanca's stage on Street Fighter 2.
And if you could complete all of the levels and get all of the stars, you could unlock Luigi as a playable character.
So there are all these rumors about do this and that and go into the hole in Zora's domain and that's where you're going to find the Triforce.
And you go to the Croft Manor, run round the swimming pool 3 times, and then swan dive into the pool.
There was a rumor that you could push this truck that was next to the SSM out of the way, and for some reason Mew would be hidden underneath.
This quest line rewarded you with a one-hit kill dagger.
You could use codes or a game genie to access these broken, unfinished stages. You would just immediately fall to your death. Mere existence of stuff like this on a cartridge just blew my young mind.
Mystery, discovery. Two concepts that are fundamental to the experience of playing most games, but concepts that rarely come up in the discourse around them. We comfortably chat about mechanics and difficulty, story, graphics, performance, and frame rates, but despite the important role they play in game design, rare is it that we think about mystery and discovery. I certainly never gave them much notice. That was until March of 2014 when I attended the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. GDC is an annual get-together for people working within the video games industry. Programmers, artists, designers, and engineers, with a light sprinkling of biz dev and media. It was there that I first met Jim Crawford.
Hi, I'm Jim Crawford. My title at Twinbeard is Sandwich Imagineer. I made Frog Fractions. I may or may not have already shipped Frog Fractions 2.
Jim was giving a talk at GDC entitled Preserving a Sense of Discovery in the Age of Spoilers. He argued that before the internet, mystery was easy. But in a world where the answer to every question is just a few clicks away, and where pre-release marketing for games is so aggressive, that mystery doesn't come free anymore. He said that now, more than ever, developers need to be intentional about preserving it. Ever since Jim's talk, I've been fascinated by the concept of mystery and how it touches everything from design to marketing to online communities and the video games media. To help me understand the important role of discovery in game design, I entrusted the help of some ringers. Derek Yu, creator of platforming roguelike Spelunky, Jonathan Blow, the mind behind Braid and last year's The Witness, and of course Jim, who I met at his co-working space at the Oakland Video Game Museum. Over the next few weeks, we're going to release spoiler-filled episodes about how wonderful and mysterious their games are. But in this one, we're going to take a look at how games from our childhood made us wonder, and the modern games that are working to keep player discovery alive.
Growing up, it was usually the Midway games that were the source of most rumors. One of the more common ones was that in Mortal Kombat 2, you could unlock and play as Kano and Sonya. However, I had a friend who had 100% convinced himself that he actually saw this happen in an arcade. He said a guy showed him how to do it and he was playing as Jax, and the game took him to some sort of platforming level in outer space, and when he got to the end of the level, he freed Kano and got to play as Kano. I really think my friend actually believed he saw this happen, because occasionally he would lament that he didn't write the method down because he was sure at the time that it was going to be in all the magazines.
The secrets that aren't real are the ones that are just in the player's head. I would say they're way more important. Well, one of my favorite examples is in Battlezone. Battlezone is a game about you're in a tank and you're shooting other tanks, and that's really all there is to the game. But in the background, there is an active volcano, just drawn with vector art lines. And one of the creators of the game talked about receiving letters from players about how they heard a rumor that if you drove far enough in your tank, you could climb the volcano and go into the volcano and explore a castle. The fact that this was just a rumor, that it was all in the players' heads and not part of the game, it is still part of the cultural value that Battlezone has. Every game was more or less like that back then, and part of that was that I was a kid.
So when I was a kid in elementary school, we were obsessed with Street Fighter 2. It's literally all we talked about during recess. And we talk about the special moves, we talk about which character was the best, and we talk about the rumors. And the biggest rumor at that time was fighting Shenlong. So Shenlong is Ryu's mentor, And when Ryu defeats you in Street Fighter 2, he says you must defeat Shenlong to stand a chance. So EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, ran an article. They said, you can actually fight Shenlong, and here's how you do it. And it was absolutely bonkers, like how you do it. You've got to use Ryu, perfect rounds all the way till you get to M. Bison. And then when you get to M. Bison, you have to have 10 consecutive draw matches with him.
That's so mean.
Yeah,
That's so mean.
it's ridiculous. And then, supposedly, Shenlong would jump on the screen, grab M. Bison, throw him off the screen, and then you'd fight him. And of course, he was crazy.
Right.
And EGM said, we couldn't even beat him because like he threw fireballs with no recovery time, and he could throw you out of the air, and he had like this crazy dragon punch.
I remember hearing that the actual problem there was that Shenlong was a mistranslation, that it meant like dragon punch or something. That it was like, you must defeat my dragon punch to stand a chance.
With my limited amount of Chinese, I think that's actually right. Yeah. Because long in Chinese is dragon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it's cool because that actually added to the lore, eventually you could play as Gouken or Shenlong in the Street Fighter series.
Right.
So it's like, it was actual world building just from a hoax based on this one mistranslation in Street Fighter 2. And to me, that's just so cool. There are all kinds of other rumors in Street Fighter 2. There was like, Guile could pull out a gun and shoot you. Or he had handcuffs he could like put on you and entrap you with. In E Honda's stage, there's like a bathhouse. It's in a bathhouse and there's a bath in the background. There's a rumor that you could jump into the bath after the match was over. So yeah, this fighting game, it's like not an exploration game or anything like that. Like I remember distinctly all of these rumors and just talking about this game so much. The special moves, back then, like they were mostly secret. Like you had to find out how to do them in magazines and things like that.
At the time, like one of the reasons for those games' popularity was the fact that like one guy in the arcade knew how to do the Hadouken, and nobody else did. One guy knew how to do the fatality because he downloaded a fact from Gopher on the internet.
So there are all those rumors that everyone knew about, like Shenlong and the Guile handcuffs and things like that. And then there are all the rumors that my friend just made up to try to like scam us. He told us that he had this like secret way of getting this information. I think it was like an older cousin or something like that.
We like worked at Capcom?
No, I think you're right. I think he literally said like, my cousin got a job at this company, this video game company, that's how he knows. If you give me a quarter or like your Oreo cookies at lunch, I'll tell you how to do it. I remember some of these moves so distinctly. There was Blanca's super nuclear meltdown. Yeah, that was one of the moves. And kind of like the EGM hoax, like the way you did these moves was so crazy. It was like multiple 360 motions, right? And of course it was like the best move. Blanca would explode, there'd be a mushroom cloud, and like your opponent would instantly die. And I remember going to the arcade with him, and I'm like playing him, and I'm trying to do Blanca's super nuclear meltdown, and he's just kicking my butt.
Eating your Oreo cookies.
Yeah, eating my Oreo cookies and just kicking my butt, because I'm trying to do this crazy move and I just can't do it.
In Japan, they had communal notebooks where people would, if they discovered something important in a game, they would go write it down, and you could go read, like, here's how you get past this boss in Tower of Duraga. Like all sorts of little, just the tiniest dumb secrets that just give the impression of a complete world.
It had a whole world beyond just the arenas. You've got these 2D stages that are pretty small, and it was so cool because it made Street Fighter 2 seem so much bigger.
So the Halo series really started to come into its own while I was in high school, and I always felt like it kind of embodied a certain aura of mystery. It sort of engendered that discussion with the hidden skulls and terminals, tons of Easter eggs, numerous and varied glitches, stuff like that. The one that really got me though was talk of a flying dumpster in Halo 3. I thought, surely you can't be serious, that's not a thing. I was never quite able to pull it off myself, but of course it didn't take too long for videos to surface with people doing exactly that. Flying around maps in a dumpster in glorious 240p.
If you want to make a secret these days that lasts, you really got to either dig deep, or just as a developer, you got to just not even know it exists yourself.
Right.
Right? Because like a lot of the best secrets are just glitches, right? Like if you think about Minus World from Super Mario Brothers, that was not something that Nintendo intended to put in the game.
I think Super Mario Brothers makes a really good example because, well, first of all, there were a lot of intentional secrets as well. Like they played on that a lot with like all the things hidden in blocks, in unmarked blocks. But also then there were the secrets that weren't intentional, like the minus world, which was just a coding glitch where some other kind of game data was being interpreted as a level. And if you play the Japanese version of the game, it's actually a lot more extensive. Like the data it's misinterpreting as a level there, like actually becomes a much more interesting level with Princess Peaches all over the place and like flying bloopers.
I mean, there was Adventure on the Atari 2600, which had the weird invisible dot thing. So, you know, there's a maze in the game that you have to go through to get to one of the castles, and there's a room in the middle of the maze you actually can't walk directly into. You have to get a bridge, which is parodied in Frog Fractions 2. You have to get a bridge to get into the room, and then once you get into the room, you can grab this dot that you can't even see unless you like overlap it on a wall, and then you can use that to get into another secret room somewhere. And so, you know, the little developer room with you know, Warren's name in it is sort of what gets the most attention out of that. But actually, so as a kid, I was playing with the system of those things like a lot. Because the bridge was a weird thing that was a little bit game breaking. Like if you went over the bridge from one room into another, like off the screen onto the next screen, then it would sometimes surprise you where you ended up. So you'd have some map in your head of where the rooms were with respect to each other, and maybe that wasn't totally right. And then just the thing with the dot and all the, you know, there's this thing where the dot makes things flash, but it actually flashes more with more objects in the room. So you could do weird stuff like pile up a bunch of objects and the dot in a room, and then it would be hard for the dragons to eat you because the timing was off somehow because of all the flashing. Like, there was just weird stuff going on that was beyond the basic game, but it was exciting because it involved secret objects and stuff.
So the eggplant run is kind of the ultimate secret in the game. And what it is there's an item in the game called the eggplant. It's an eggplant. You get it by sacrificing a present that you get from the shop on the altar. It's totally random. You get the eggplant and it plays a special little melody and you can pick it up. It does absolutely nothing. Asterix. It does almost absolutely nothing. It's very fragile, it breaks. But what happened is, toward the very end of the development of the Xbox version of Spelunky, I had a discussion with Andy and Eric about the eggplant, about actually having it do something. Because I figured people are gonna find this, they're gonna be so pissed off if it doesn't do anything. And so I was trying to think about what it would do. I said, okay, I'll make it so that if you hit the hidden boss at the end of the game in Hell, King Yama, if you hit his head with the eggplant, his head will turn into an eggplant. That's it, I just added that, and that was it. I didn't even think about whether it was really possible. I kind of ran through the steps in my mind, and I figured out that it's probably possible multiplayer. You have like one person holding the eggplant, the other person is getting all the items you need to get into the City of Gold and then into Hell. So it's probably possible, but whatever, we got to do certification, all this other stuff. Let's move on. And what happened is when the game eventually got ported to PC, I think people started hacking around the files more. They saw this big eggplant head, and they're like, okay, that must be what it's for. Right? Before that, people did experiments with the eggplant, but it was all like actually in the game. Oh, what happens when you drop the eggplant in acid? Nothing. But on PC, they saw the face, someone hacked the game, went straight to Yama, hit Yama with the eggplant, and voila. After the multiplayer eggplant run, the speedrunners and Let's Players started talking about a solo eggplant run and whether it was possible. Then at some point, it was like someone sent me the first solo eggplant run, and I was just, it just completely blew my mind. It involved so many tricks and glitches and stuff like that that were put together separately by different players even. It just makes Spelunky just feel like so much bigger for me. Like all of a sudden Spelunky for me is now this new world, and I feel like a stranger in it, which is just a great feeling.
Is there anything in Spelunky that people haven't found yet?
See, the thing is, I would say no, but the fact is people have found stuff that I didn't even know about. Like I was saying no long before people, did the solo eggplant run and killed the ghost. So you can kill the ghost in Spelunky by...
How can you kill the ghost?
Mystery in games can come in many forms. Rumors on the playground sparked by an interesting world, glitches in code that break the game free of its intended framework. But there are far more intentional ways to create mystery in games. But over the past decade, trends in AAA development have made this type of discovery far more rare than it ought to be. To understand how discovery is crafted, we must also talk about how it's been spoiled.
Once in a while, someone makes a puzzle game where you go into a new room and you start trying to figure it out, and after 60 seconds, if you haven't done the first thing, it pops up a box with a hint, and it's like, dude, let me just do the thing, right? I like being treated like I'm a person who has the capacity to approach problems and inquire about them and play around with them and find a solution. And that's also how I like to treat my players, of whoever decides to play the games that I design. And I feel like there's a little bit of a shortage of that. It's not necessarily true anymore that all AAA games are linear, but basically all of them were at some time, and especially when I was starting to design The Witness, right? The whole open world trendiness thing happened way later. I mean, the thing about a linear game is if someone went to the store and they bought your game for $60 and it's like God of War or something and they want to beat dudes up, if you put a puzzle in the middle of that and they can't figure it out, you're stopping them from beating dudes up. I don't know why action games felt like they had to have puzzles in them, but they did. If you block someone from proceeding in a linear game, that's not great. So they kind of streamlined that stuff out for the most part, but then also they got really heavy about hand-holding and making sure that they tell you everything that you need to proceed. And that's not even just tutorials or anything. It's take a game like Assassin's Creed style thing, right? I think that would be a really exciting game if you had to use your powers of perception to see what was happening in the city and go oh, there's a mugging happening, right? I'm gonna go break that up and get some reputation or something, right? But instead, there's HUD icons everywhere, and there's always a thing telling you where to go, and you could ignore the 3D graphics almost and just follow the HUD stuff and just complete the game, right? So, and that's not just to rag on Assassin's Creed, that's basically the direction that AAA has gone in, right? I understand why they do that. I don't like that, and as a player, I feel like it shuts part of my brain off.
The thing is, I understand the temptation as a creator to want to have a lot of control over your creation. And I think especially with a big budget game, they want to have a lot of control. You don't want to leave things to chance. You don't want to have glitches, and you don't want the players doing unexpected things. You worry about whether the player is going to get from beginning to end. These are all things that I try not to think about, and I think I have a little more freedom as an independent game developer to do, which is honestly to not have so much control over my creation. It's different with games and with other art forms because the player is actually playing your game. There's someone there controlling what's going on, and you have to give them agency. You have to give them the tools that they need to do that and the freedom to do that. You don't want to be hovering around them the whole time. You're go there, go there, no, go there, go there.
Which Fable, it was Fable 2 that had the dog. And so the PR for that before it came out was you're gonna really build a relationship with your dog, right? He's gonna be your friend and he's gonna help you out. But having some kind of a relationship with an NPC creature involves maybe paying attention to it and seeing what, and maybe you could see what the dog's mood is right now or something. But when they shipped the game, maybe they experimented with that stuff, but when they shipped the game, the function of the dog was to tell you when there's a buried treasure nearby, right? And he would go bark, but there'd be a HUD icon under him that says treasure over here, right? So it's why didn't you just give me the dog didn't matter, right? All the animations and all that, it was you just looked for the HUD icon that said treasure here.
Yeah, I think to make a world feel really real and immersive, you have to take a step back, and you have to try not to guide the player so much and show them everything, because that is the fun part about games. Discovering things on my own, making my own mistakes, that's what gives the games meaning. Like when I feel like someone just has their hand on my shoulder and they're just kind of pushing me around, I just feel like I'm losing a lot of the meaning of games, which is that joy of discovery.
But that's like an outcome of this AAA process, right? Of like, they put it in focus testing. If people get confused about something in focus testing, then that's like a rough edge on the thing that you get out the file and you file it off. On the one hand, sometimes those are legitimate problems, right? Like the game is confusing in some way. But on the other hand, I feel like this particular way of solving those problems like kills the games a little bit. It squeezes some life out of them. I'm not saying that the AAA games putting all that hand-holding in is not the best business decision. It may be. On the other hand, Minecraft sure made a ton of money, and it doesn't do that.
That was one of the great things about the first Zelda, is it was like pure exploration. And I remember reading a quote from Shigeru Miyamoto saying that he was nervous about releasing the game because it was, at the time, it felt like such a risky design move to not tell the player what to do in such an expansive open world. And I think it totally paid off because I loved the game. And I remember playing the game and having my dad sitting next to me, and he was just drawing maps and like writing down all the riddles and the answers to the riddles and stuff like that. And on the map, which I still have, there are all these X's on the walls where you could bomb, like where we tried bombing, and whether there was an entrance there or not, right? Like he'd mark it on the map. In Zelda 1, you had no idea where to bomb. In Zelda 3, all of the places that you could bomb just had cracks, like in a door shape. And to me, that's not even really a secret. That's just, you may as well put a door there that has a lock on it, right?
Whereas before, when there was no cracks, there could have been caves everywhere.
Right, and you could use the candle to hurt enemies. You could use it to light up rooms. You could also use it to burn bushes and uncover secret entrances. It just felt like each item or whatever else had kind of a separate use beyond just opening up a secret, right? And that made the secrets feel a lot more real. I'm using this candle, which has all these other purposes. I just randomly threw it on this bush, because that's something you'd think about, like, oh, can I burn this bush as a kid, or even as an adult? Like, I'm gonna try this fire and leaves, right? And then it doesn't always work, but when it does, and you see a ladder or a staircase going down, that's huge. And then the funny thing is, you go in there, and then you have some old man that makes you pay for breaking his door. Like, it's not even, you would expect to find some treasure or something, but it's just like some old man. And that also, I think, contributes to it, because if you have every secret lead to some fabulous treasure, I think that kind of takes away a little bit from the secret.
If the content of the game is really actually good, you should want to play it because it's interesting and cool, not because you got a little gold star at the end for solving it, right? And at the time when I started The Witness, it was this time of great cynicism in game design, which we're still in some territories, where Facebook games were happening and iOS games were starting to happen a little later than that, and they're just all about grinding little achievements or micro achievements or whatever you want to call that stuff. Yeah, and there's like no actual game there anymore.
Right.
And I wanted to go the opposite direction of that. As a designer, I don't know exactly what experience people are going to have, right? Some people are going to find some things hard and other things easy, and then other people will have those roles swapped, right? If you design such that you kill anything that's people find hard, if you design such that you kill everything that some percentage of people find hard, then you end up getting the subset of what all those people can do, right? So, which might, if your game could be this big mass, right, you end up getting this nucleus in the middle. There's all this potential that you killed, just because somebody might not have a good time with it.
Having all this information out there does empower you to not worry about whether your secrets are too difficult. Like, you can really bury stuff. So there are things in Spelunky that are like 1 out of 1,000 People find them, and when people do find them, it feels legendary because the chances are so small. Right. It's as simple as that, and Spelunky itself, just not even the secrets that I put in the game, but just because of the random level generator, it generates dead ends and things like that. And you'd think that would be bad, but the thing is, you need to have some of that, because it's like, you have to contrast that with when you actually do find treasure and cool stuff. Going to the end of a corridor and hitting a dead end just makes it that much better when you do find treasure. Like, you don't want to have the feeling that every corridor is gonna have treasure at the end of it, or everything you do is gonna have some kind of tangible reward. Because I think that actually makes the game less immersive. You don't feel like it's a real place anymore. You feel like this is something that was designed for me. This is like a roller coaster where, I'm just gonna go through all the cool things that the designer has laid out. One of the most fun things about games is learning. It's learning the game and sort of getting that knowledge for yourself about this little world, right? The only way you can really do that is by figuring it out yourself. If the game tells me something before I get a chance to learn it myself, one, that's just really annoying. But two, it robs you of that experience. And it's interesting because I have a 3-year-old, and every day she's doing all kinds of new stuff and learning new things. And there are obviously plenty of times where she has trouble with something, right? Like, she's putting together a puzzle and she can't figure it out. And she says, "Dad, can you help me? Or can you just do this for me? It's too hard, I can't do it." And there is a temptation to go in and be like, okay, well, this is how you do it, and then just do it for her. But, I know that if I do that, she's not gonna learn how to do it herself. She's not gonna grow up to be an independent and confident person, right? And so I don't, even though it's hard to watch her struggle with stuff. And I have the same feeling about people playing my games is I want them to learn and grow and become confident players of games. I know that, and this is a famous story, Miyamoto, when he was a kid, he stumbled across this cave in the woods. He was just walking around, he found this cave, and that was kind of the inspiration for The Legend of Zelda, supposedly, right? It's kind of like part of the legend. But I think the interesting about that story is you never really hear about what was in the cave. Right. Probably there was not any treasure in there, right? It's probably just an empty cave with some bat poop in it or something like that. The story is not about what he found, it's about the fact that he came across it. That's the important part about these mysteries, is it's not so much even what's in there, what you get from it, but it's the feeling that it's real, that it's personal, and that when you discover it, it feels like you really discovered it.
Discovery is something that developers have to be quite intentional about. Mystery involves risk from time to time, a scary proposition for any developer. But doing so creates personal moments of discovery that can leave a lasting impression on the player. However, there's one thing that threatens this type of rich personal discovery. It's the same thing you're staring at right now.
Part of it is that games were just a lot more unknowable because there was no internet and because marketing was a lot more limited. The closest thing you would get to the internet nowadays ruining a game for you was getting the guide in Nintendo Power. Here's all the dungeons from The Adventure of Link.
Are there any genres you think that really suffer in the age of the internet?
Adventure games, I think, are basically I can't play them now. I just don't have the patience. The Sierra games and LucasArts games, I loved everything in the 80s and 90s. And they're all predicated on the idea that you're going to be stuck for 99% of the time and not know what to do to advance. The fun comes from when you get unstuck for that 1% of the time. That's where the fun is in those games. In order to play those games nowadays, you really have to have preternatural patience because at any time you could just go look up the answer and just have it immediately. In order to not look up the answer, you really have to work at it, and there's not much to do while you're doing that work. There's not much to distract you from it.
The information surfacing power of the internet causes a couple of problems when it comes to discovery. Not only does it provide an easy way out for puzzles, but it also bombards us with a constant stream of information about games we haven't even played yet.
One of my favorite memories actually as a kid was finding like those shareware CDs that had 100 or 1,000 games on them, and just sifting through those and trying each game, having no idea what it was about.
Do you think that we know more about games before they come out now than we did like 20 years ago?
Absolutely, yeah. Like at the time, if you heard about a game, probably you saw a couple of like postage stamp sized screenshots in a magazine. Maybe you saw a TV ad for it. Maybe all you heard was your friend describing it.
How much it's a good idea to know about a game beforehand depends really heavily on the specific game, probably. I think for a lot of games it's true that you know too much about it, but also it's probably true about movies. I mean, you have these movies that there's supposed to be a surprise in it somewhere, and of course that's also the reason why you would go see it. You know, I had to deal with that question very directly on The Witness because it ended up being a much more expensive game to make than I thought it would be. I had to borrow a bunch of money. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna come out soon. We better start publicizing it in some way. All of the cool stuff about the game was secrets that you would discover in the process of playing it. In the absence of that, all we had to show people was, look, you draw lines in these mazes, isn't that cool? And how do you get people excited about that, right? I do enjoy sitting down and playing a game and not knowing what I'm getting into, right? That's the most enjoyable thing. I don't want to know, you know, like let's say I played the new Call of Duty game. It would have been much cooler to not know that you launch into space and spend a lot of time on the spaceship. Like that would have been exciting.
It almost seems like the wheels of capitalism are...
They're at odds with having the best experience, right? But on the other hand, there's so many games now, right? So Call of Duty is a special case, but for any particular game that doesn't have a $200 trillion marketing budget, would you actually play that game if you didn't hear about the cool thing about it? Well, maybe not, right? And so I think, you know, there's certain kinds of cool things that are still cool after you know about them generally, and there's other things that aren't.
I remember talking to Sean Murray before about how he thought the best thing about Minecraft was that they didn't give you the recipe book. Like you just had to figure out what the things were.
Minecraft is a game that just drops you into the world and lets you figure things out. Figuring out how to exist in that space was itself kind of the puzzle. Having to look up in a wiki what the recipes are, that's like, on its face, that's kind of bad UX. But the fact that someone discovered that, they got a really good experience out of that. And like as it went on, and then they ended up adding a progression to that game, I think it actually got less interesting. I think that's actually a really good example of a bad ending to a mystery. It was really a lot more interesting when you didn't have an ending.
While many games are overly marketed or live at risk of having their secrets spoiled by the internet, a new form of mystery has been born through the connected communication the internet provides. Mysteries that are deeper and even more obscure.
In a way, it's empowering as a developer because we have so much information. People can discover these secrets very easily, but it also means that the sky's the limit as far as how difficult you can make these secrets. That's something that is actually very empowering for me when I'm trying to design a secret. I just try to make the secret as good as I possibly can, and I don't worry about whether people are actually going to find it.
One of the most effective ways is just make your secrets just more obscure. I think one of the most powerful examples of this, of a design that accommodates for this, is Dark Souls. It is designed to be solved by the community, and if you are playing the game 6 months after release, reading wikis written by those people in the first 6 months, you were playing a very different game than they got.
No, I mean, Dark Souls would have fit right in the 80s, man. Like, that's just a regular game. In fact, it's probably easier than most 80s games, honestly.
So what happened? Like, did we just get soft or something?
Well, we went toward longer form experiences, right? It's long form and you're at home, so you don't have to keep popping quarters in. So why does it make sense to kill you all the time? Like it, you know, and so the design, I think, naturally changed, and I think that's totally fine. But, you know, as things change, if the mainstream goes a certain way, it leaves alternatives. It leaves like vacuum spots that people could occupy, right? So Dark Souls then went into this niche that was left open that used to be filled, right?
You know, I was saying how the Zelda series kind of branched off and it had its own separate evolutionary path past like maybe Zelda 2. I feel like Dark Souls is kind of like along that path that feels more connected to Zelda 1, where It's this open world that's all about mystery and having you discover that for yourself. You know, like if Mount Everest had an elevator, I think a lot less people would try to get to the top. It would just be a lot less special, right?
While some games in the past did attain mystery for free, the best examples were when developers took a risk and gave players the tools and the freedom to figure it out for themselves. Mystery lives on in games like Frog Fractions, The Witness, and Spelunky. We'll dive into those in the coming weeks. But it also beats in the heart of games like the Soul series, and if early reports are to be believed, perhaps even the new Zelda, Breath of the Wild. Proof that no matter how advanced video games become, there's nothing we love more than a good mystery.
Yeah, it's definitely about the journey being its own reward. The video games, they're these fantasy worlds that aren't connected to real life in a way, so it's weird because we spend a lot of time learning about them and figuring them out, but somehow that's just so empowering because I feel like every time you learn about a new game and the game's world and you're uncovering all these secrets and stuff like that, I don't know, somehow it just feels like it's shining a light on ideas that were kind of like darkened before. So even though it's like I'm not actually accomplishing things that affect real life, so to speak, it still feels like my mind is being expanded, like I know more, and it's just very nourishing in that sense. And then, you know, some people also say that we're living in a simulation, so maybe it's games all the way down, you know what I mean?